Actually, it says, oh, okay. We may be good. And that is a lousy start of the call. Sorry, I'm gonna try again with more excitement. Hey, hello, everyone. I like that you're here. Anyways, so do you guys have anything that do you think that should take priority and should be discussed first?
Maybe the OAuth 2 experimental module proposal.
Yes, that. I'm pretty sure that everyone here knows, but just in case, Wim here kindly wrote that that issue in the ideas project issue queue. I think it was moved to it anyways by Gabor. Basically, that says that we should consider adding the auth module. That this should not be a surprise because it's been there like forever, as in the API first meta issue. So yeah, it's been officially proposed as it was the plan, and now I'm gonna just let the discussion happen in the issue queue before submitting any real patch. I don't know if that is wise, if I should just put some code up. I already got a code review based on reacting on that issue. So that is
great. Wow.
Yeah. You
That's
would
interesting.
totally
I didn't
guess
know that.
what. You can guess who was
I would guess Daniel.
Yes, it was Daniel. And he made me learn something very interesting, which is that tuple can natively interact with PSR7 requests and responses, and I didn't know that. I was using the services that transform between HTTP Foundation style requests and responses and PSR7, but apparently the code can be simplified and just omit all that and just forget Symfony for a second in there. So that is good, I think. And the bad part is that his patch could not be automatically reviewed or could not be tested by the test bot because there is a limitation right now. I know that they are working on it. Ryan just was mentioning this before in Twitter. You cannot do functional testing on modules, country modules that have composer dependencies because the test bot will not build the environment bringing in your composer dependency. It just clones the repo to install the module. It doesn't use composer require. So yeah, until that is fixed, I'm not sure if all development should be moved again. And I know that this sounds ridiculous because we've moved from GitHub to tuple.org, and now I'm planning to move back to GitHub because Travis can do the composer requirement of the library. What do you think?
So I think that if we switch to a core patch instead, it wouldn't be a problem because for Drupal core, as far as I know, testbot is doing the necessary composer install stuff. So if we update Drupal core's composer.json in the core patch that adds OAuth 2 as a module, then I think you would be fine. But it is very, very, very painful and annoying for content modules, of course, because it prevents you from doing the right thing. So yeah,
right.
I feel your pain.
Yeah, I may just submit the patch, but I was hesitant to do it because with the first comment on how to integrate with core, it already challenged some of the assumptions that I had made. So, have such as the grants that I thought were the best fit to be in core.
Because somebody because Daniel posted password and authorization code, and you thought of two others?
I thought of password and client credentials.
So yeah, that's so. First of all, apparently the point of a plan issue is to not contain any code. That should be in a separate issue. So the layout plugin module was just committed to Drupal 8 a few days ago. And they also have a separate issue for plan, which is where you discuss things and get sign-off from committers, as in, yes, we think this is a good idea, and only then does it make sense to roll a core patch, actually. So that's one thing. This issue shouldn't contain any code. Apparently, I didn't know either. But we can easily open up a separate issue outside of the ideas issue queue and in the Drupal core issue queue. So that's not something that needs to block us. We can do that right now. That wouldn't be a problem. But I think maybe the most valuable thing to discuss, and that's already becoming apparent, as you're saying, is agreeing on which grants to add. So maybe that is the most valuable thing to do. You have I think, the best view on which ones make most sense, and you had a very clear idea. You had a rationale for that. So maybe the most valuable thing for us to get this moving forward as fast as possible is for you to explain why you think password and client credentials make most sense. And then we'll see what Daniel responds. Maybe Daniel was mistaken and he actually meant client credentials. That sort of thing happens, right? Maybe he is very adamant about authorization code, and maybe you get convinced. And that's the sort of thing we need to build consensus on anyway. So I think that's the thing that makes most sense to do first, brands, because everybody is +1 on the principle so far, which is a great thing, of course.
I think so. I've read a bunch of comments talking about JWTs instead. Maybe we should do a better job communicating that this is OAuth using JWT. So I'm not sure how you would take advantage of JSON Web Tokens with this, but beyond the OAuth flow, I mean. But we could totally do it. I mean, what the library does is it creates a web token. So when you do the grant, it kind of checks that you can authorize this user, right? Otherwise, it will not give you a token. So when we come back, we don't fetch the token from the database to avoid the extra non-negligible load to do the querying for tokens and then loading it. But we are just decrypting the token and taking the user ID from there. Because you could then create tokens separately if you knew the algorithm, and you have the private key to sign the tokens. So this could be a way to implement JWTs, but maybe this is not the goal, to kind of convince people that they should use this instead of JSON Web Tokens, and this discussion will just derail into something that we don't want to.
Yeah, I think it would derail as long as everybody is in favor. Like, I don't think anybody is saying adding OAuth 2 is a bad idea. As soon as we start seeing that, things change. But also, the library that we are depending upon does actually come with support for JSON Web Tokens. So adding a module, an authentication provider in Drupal 8 at a later point will actually become easier once we've done this, I think.
Right. Yeah.
I don't think anybody is against JWT. It's just that OAuth 2 is the overwhelming majority use case, I think. That's all. So okay. I don't think we need to. And also, it's not yet been mentioned on the issue. It's just one person on Twitter, I think. I saw it as well. So it's either on Twitter or on Dries' blog. Yeah, so far, support is overwhelming, I think, for the approach we outlined.
Okay, cool. Then I will just do that and see how things move forward. Making my proposal for the grants for password and client credentials.
Perfect.
Yeah. So that said, I think that it kind of leaves things to flow naturally. I guess that my next task beyond posting that would be just stay vigilant and maybe sync with everyone here next week and see what the next steps are. Not worry too much about this week.
No, yeah, that's exactly what I would do. Just monitor the conversation a bit. I don't think we'll get dozens and dozens of responses. I think maybe we'll get 1 dozen, maybe 2 dozen. I don't think it'll get too much more than that, because it still doesn't affect the majority of the Drupal community. So not everybody is going to have a strong opinion, a strong enough opinion to post a comment at least.
Right, so. and even if OAuth has been controversial in some forums, it is undeniably a standard that's been working great for many cases. So I don't think that there will be a lot of pushback and controversy like around the TripleCon redesign or things like that. So
yeah. Yep.
All right.
All right.
Cool. So moving on to JSON API things. So at this moment, things with JSON API are, I'm going to give first a status update. This past week, we worked a lot on a patch to re-architect a little bit the plugin system that was in place. So just as everything, technical depth was added and things got into a weird state, and when someone came with new eyes on it, he saw the things that didn't make sense. So I finally got the time to review that. It wasn't an easy review. It took a long time. But it was great because that was much needed, because I felt kind of fuzzy around the whole details. I found myself not having the ideas clear and resorting to IDE autocompletion to know exactly what I needed to do. So
you mean in the code in the current state?
Yes, before the patch.
Base, yes. Yes.
So,
okay. That's encouraging, because that's me looking at it with fresh eyes. Like I understood everything you tried to do, and I understood why you made certain decisions. But then, yeah, at some point you find yourself needing to go a slightly different direction, and then some parts didn't get refactored along with it, and so you had some leftover things that didn't connect in a logical way. That's all, and that's natural. That's normal.
Right.
So,
yeah, that's probably when we introduced plugins, because I was against making these plugins at the beginning, and just be a factory that read from the entity system. And then I realized that as I was adding features, I was replicating plugins in a certain way. So I tried to include plugins on top of whatever was before. So that needs to go away. I agree. The things that I'm hesitant to remove are the resource config objects, as they are named now, and that is a very bad name for an object that is so important, as you were stating in the discussion there. Basically, the proposal is to replace it with a single string that then we can manipulate to explode and implode again, to know what is the entity type and bundle. So this basically, this should be, maybe it does too much, but this should be an object that just holds the information of entity type and entity type ID and bundle name on one side, in the Drupal side of things, and in the JSON API side of things knows how to generate the type for the resource. So if we want to
just
change,
those two things is what you're saying.
Yeah.
So basically the components, so basically the metadata necessary to generate a JSON API type, and then whatever internal information, so that when you are dealing with plugin specific logic, so the entity type logic, that it then can extract the entity type ID and bundle so that it, for example, can figure out how to link to something else. That's basically what you're saying.
Yeah, okay. Exactly. And if anyone is super annoyed by the type statics, they can, I don't know how, but they could just override a method which is the one that joins them with the double dash, and so be it, right? So make the code.
Oh, so you mean if they want a completely different scheme or pattern for the JSON API types?
Yeah, that is just an example. What I mean is make the code base unaware of the double dash usage.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, because that was the interesting thing as well. Everything, all class names are basically unaware of Drupal entities. Entities are a Drupal concept. JSON API doesn't have entities. JSON API only has resources. And you had everything resource named, if you will, but then that code was calling entity stuff, and that was very confusing. And it makes sense that that's how the code base grew. But so that's also what you're saying. Everything should be JSON API-esque and not Drupal-esque. Should be not Drupal aware, except in that one, in the ideal case, that knows about the entity stuff.
Right. That would be the connection, the interface where the two worlds meet. So one thing that I'm realizing right now that is not there is the reverse path, where we go from a type to detect the entity type and bundle. In those situations, the code is doing an explode in using the double dash. So that may be just a follow-up. I mean, we don't need to get everything in this single issue. Or we can. That's up to you. I mean, whatever seems easy for you. Sometimes it's just easier to go in with the big guns and do all the things. And the other thing, I can't believe I forgot. I'm gonna bring up the.
Putting +1 for the proposed refactoring, because it is really just a proposal. And you're saying it sounds like that it just needs some extra work, and then it should be good to go. Is that what you're saying, or?
Yes.
Okay. Cool.
Oh, and
go ahead.
And the other thing, sorry, I had to go to the issue to remember. The other thing is that I would like to retain the ability to disable resources at the plugin level, and that is.
That's what I was going to ask.
Okay, that's the other thing. So one of the. So I totally see what you mean. We can just disable the route and it just doesn't exist. But with relationships, we kind of have to know if we have a resource tied to the relationship. So when we are serializing an entity, we will either put that entity reference field inside of the attributes if there is no resource to reference, or inside of the relationships if there is a resource to reference to. So if we want to support disabling resources at all, which I think is fair, and it's kind of a use case that it came up really early in the development cycle by people already using this in dev with the dev version. If we want to keep that feature, we should be able to query from other places. Is this plugin enabled, or is this resource enabled? So I guess that if we can do that, I'm happy with whatever approach. It seems to me that it's easier to just create an instance of the plugin and check on is enabled method. But
so I had a few ideas around that. routing, I agree that's problematic. But the other thing that I mentioned in the issue is the entity type access control handler. So for example, if you are not allowed to view term entities, then we will not embed that, or we will not show that relation because you are not allowed to view it. Work, except if you're saying, I have a use case where things actually are accessible, but I still don't want them to be exposed. Then that makes things more difficult, of course. But otherwise, if there is no such edge case, or at least there is no such edge case for now, then we can make this a whole lot simpler and just rely on the existing entity access system, which also removes the need for this one extra flag thing that you have to know how to set and so on. So it's then reusing all the existing infrastructure instead of adding its own.
I'm +1 on that principle. I mean, if you can get the information by scraping HTML, you will have trouble convincing me that you shouldn't get a structured JSON data, right?
Right, exactly.
If you can access the data, you can access the data. But I may be mistaken. But that is how the code base operates. It just defers all the access checks on the entity system. However, things get complicated when we are adding to the mix write operations, because sometimes you do have access to view stuff, but not to write stuff. So that means that you will not operate under the assumption that whatever you read from the API, you can post it to the API. So what I would do if I was developing a consumer for a JSON API is, okay, so what is what an article looks like? I would go into Drupal, create an article, and then go to the API and see, okay, so this is the payload. Now I'm going to post this payload back. So what you get from the API should be the same of what you expect. But if you are allowed to have different permissions on read and write, then these two things, and we're basing the shape of the payload on these permissions, then we can diverge from one another. So that's the only big problem that I see.
But that's already a problem, right? It's totally possible that, for example, you are allowed to create articles that use any of the tags in the predefined vocabulary, but you're not allowed to create additional tags. And there's a gazillion examples that you can think of like that. So I think it's quite often going to be the case that you can read an entity plus all of its references, but then are not allowed to either create such an entity or create one or more of its references. That is not something you can ever avoid, I think, because there are lots of use cases where you indeed want to restrict those things. So
right. So how
I think there is an asymmetry in the sense that it's going to be extremely, extremely rare that you can post or update something, post or patch something, but not read it. But it's going to be very common that you are allowed to read something, but not create something of that type. And how can you deal with that? Well, you will just get a 403 stating you're not allowed to create either this entire thing that you're creating or a 403 for the reference that you're trying to create. And then you're going to have to adjust your request body. So for example, let's say I read an article so that I have a sense of the structure of the payload, as you said. And then I'm going to post the exact same thing, but remove the ID so that it's going to generate an ID. But then it's complaining to me with a 403 because I'm creating also a new term, which I'm not allowed to do. Then you can just choose to omit that term or reuse an existing one, and that will work. So that is indeed a slight modification of the payload, but I don't think there is any way to avoid that because it's just simply a valid use case.
So there would be. So I see what you mean, and I think I agree even further because we are not supporting multiple operation rights. So you can only
Right.
reuse you can only reuse existing tags. The only
I
thing
see.
is that the drop folder or the drop box where you can just write but not read, it
Mhm.
cannot be easily
Oh,
implemented.
sorry. Well,
So if
can
we
you say that again about Dropbox?
if if we are basing the assumption that a resource is enabled if you can read from that bundle, then the scenario of the mailbox where you can just put things but not see the result of them, you can just post but not read whatever you posted, then that would not be possible. That's the only thing, which is, as you said, extremely rare, but a valid use case, I guess.
Right. But if that's the use case, then I think any sort of thing that is doing that in a public way, as in, let's say I have a example at comp site that is a sort of mailbox setup where you can write but not read, that sort of site is going to have to provide a very, very clear example of how to do that, because otherwise, how could you figure it out? And if it's not a public site, but it's something you control, then you can easily allow you as a developer to still read things so that you can get the code up and running, so that you can write code and first inspect the payload and then emulate it, and then later on in production disable the reading. So I personally don't see that as being a big problem. You're always going to have a little bit more of a struggle there to figure out what you need to do, I think. And that's already the case, right? How is this different compared to what it is today? If you are allowed to write but not read in the head version of JSON API, then that means that the resource cannot be disabled because it must be enabled since you can write to it. But the entity access control is set to not allow reading, which means you already have this exact same problem.
Right, but yeah, no, yeah, my reasoning went into a cul-de-sac very quickly there.
That's fine.
Okay.
That's fine.
Okay, no,
that's why we are talking about this.
You convince me.
Okay.
People
all right.
say
So the conclusion
that
is drop the concept of enabled and instead just rely on entity access control handler.
Right. The view operation.
And everything else, right?
Oh, no, I mean when. Yeah, exactly. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm working under the assumption that other humans may have a different brain than mine, so I understand things in my own way. But yes, I know what you mean.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
So yeah, I think that even simplifies things further.
It means that. So the thing I want to do for JSON API is to go more in the direction of how the big pipe module, for example, works than in the direction that the REST module works. And you've already set things up in that exact way, which is it's a module that you install and there is nothing to configure. And this makes it even more like that because there is no API, because it just conforms to the existing APIs. It just exposes data that already exists, and you can only access what you're allowed to access by what the rest of the system already defines. And so that removes so much potential for misconfiguration, for extra validation that we have to do, for support requests that we are going to get. It makes things so much simpler for everything and for everyone, precisely because we are building upon all of the infrastructure that everything else provides. Whereas the REST module, for example, you have to create a that conforms to that exact structure, that you have to know how to deploy, and you have to know about all the internal details. All of that just goes away with JSON API. And exactly. I think that's part of the beauty of JSON API, so that you just can access all of the contents in Drupal depending on what you're allowed to do. And that's it.
Yeah. So that brings to the final thing that I have, which is dropping the ID key. So I think that there is no thinking about this configurable prefix. That should just go away, because that is just route information, and you can alter that with the routing system. So
Yes.
that's out of the
Yes.
question. That was silly to start with. It wasn't in 777, but it is
No,
nowadays.
it wasn't. Yeah.
So I guess that on the UUID, dropping the UUID configurability. For the ones that are not super familiar with the code base, this is that nowadays with JSON API you can say, I want all my payloads to use entity IDs, which is totally legit, but we don't think that is ideal, because it kind of leaks Drupalisms outside of Drupal, because the IDs are only unique across entity types, right? So you could have an ID 1 for user and an ID 2, and an ID 1 for node article, but you will never have correlating IDs, which is what you're hinting if you're using entity IDs, that they are correlating, but they are not, because there are bundles. So maybe you have node article 1, node page 2, a node page 3, node article 4. So they are not correlative, and they are not universally unique. So the idea is that get ourselves out of the trouble and use UUIDs everywhere. That also means use UUIDs as entity references, which internally we have to translate. But that's an implication as well. So
another thing is that it's a problem to use sequential IDs, so IDs and not UUIDs, because it makes it possible for you to have the exact same article or the exact same user, the exact same something on the client and the server, and have them have different IDs. UUIDs mean that they can be correlated. So if you use JSON API for syncing between two sites, for example, and if you create content on site A and you create content on site B, they end up with both, let's say, ID 45. UUIDs would prevent that, and they would ensure that they are syncable.
Yes, and additionally to that is that you don't want to open a vector of attack in sites that are very content sensitive by allowing an attacker to guess, or if there is an article 45, there must be an article 46, which may have the information that I want. That is a smaller reason that adds to that decision. But since entity IDs are so predominant, this was configurable. It was defaulting to use UUIDs across the board, but you had a configuration option in the JSON API module that allowed you to revert to use entity IDs everywhere. So that adds a layer of complexity that as discussed in the issue queue, we think is not worth maintaining. And on top of that, there are the reasons that we just stated of why we should advise people not to use IDs and use UUIDs instead. So the take on advice is we're not supporting the thing that we wouldn't advise. So I guess that on the operational point of view, I've seen this UUID support, this configurability of the UUID or ID removal across two different issues, and we should just consolidate in one. So I understand that with the big refactor, things get in the way. So we just need to.
Yeah, I would say let's first remove the ID configurability thing in a separate issue the one we actually have for that very purpose. It indeed just got in the way, and that's the only reason I even touched it in the refactor issue. But I'll first finish the smaller issue that is just about fixing that or changing that, and then I'll continue in the big refactor issue. Does that sound okay?
That sounds perfect. And if I can, I may have some small bandwidth this week. Things are still a little bit crazy, but I may have some small bandwidth this week. And if I can help you writing code or reviewing, just push me in that direction.
Okay. Yeah. This week I have a very crazy week as well, so I don't think I'll have too much time. Maybe on Friday, maybe before, but I wouldn't count on it. So what I will try to do to make sure that JSON API is also moving forward, if you think that's okay, then I would like to also start writing the JSON API as an experimental module proposal, so that we can get that already posted and we can start building consensus on that one as well. And we can still continue this one big refactor, which is really the only big thing besides the ID/UUID thing that we want to get fixed before it's an experimental module. The more we can do, the merrier, the better, of course. But I think the time is okay for us to propose JSON API for core inclusion as well. Do you agree, or?
Yeah, I totally agree. And
okay.
I would be happy if Auth2 and JSON API landed at the same time, because that it would make so much sense to have examples that used both things at the same time, like the writing documentation for Auth2 that uses JSON API things. I think it makes a lot of sense. But let's things run their course separately. Let's not.
Yeah, definitely. But I would hope that OAuth2 would land sooner than JSON API, because it's a more well-contained thing. It doesn't expose new routes. It only exposes new authentication method. And we already have the base test coverage that allows us to super easily add functional test coverage for OAuth2 as well, so that we can test OAuth2 in combination with reading, updating, creating nodes, using JSON, using JSON, all of those combinations we can easily add test coverage for. And so that's why I'm quite hopeful that we can pull that off easier than JSON API.
Yeah, cool. Then yeah, go ahead. We can just coordinate like the other time.
Yep. Yep.
Or you can post it, and if I have
no, I will not post it without your approval. No. Okay, I will write up a draft and I'll get it reviewed by you and by some other people, and we'll see what feedback comes up. Because if I just post it, then I'm certain I will have forgotten some things. So it's better to have your feedback.
Okay.
Besides,
cool.
Shouldn't you be the one to post it? I'm happy to write it and you can post it because it's your baby.
Okay, we can do that too.
Yeah.
I just feel that I ramble too much and I'm not focused and not seasoned on this kind of bureaucratic things.
Doesn't matter. Yeah, it's a bit of a bureaucracy, but yeah, moving it into core means that core commits to supporting it for a long period of time. So it kind of makes sense that we can't just add whatever to Drupal core, right? So.
Cool. So just leave it for the rest of the people and the video that I created a bunch of issues like I'm gonna post the link like this one. Someone brought to my attention that this was a thing. It's 28, 34, 74, 7. If I don't know if the chat gets recorded or not. I just read that out loud. If anyone wants to, but anyways, this is kind of an easy starter if you want to get in and start playing and writing patches. Maybe this is a good place to go, but be quick, or I will get to it before you do. And that's my finale for the meeting, unless you have anything else.
Nope.
That sounds like a no. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for the update.
And I guess we'll meet on the same time next week. Oh, actually, the next meeting is canceled in front of the more general API first meeting, which includes the REST system and the rest of the ecosystem. So not next week, but the following one. We'll meet here. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.